Okay. Well, as a sign isn't obvious, you're in Goblin Kings and Rooster Knights, an introduction to the Autumn's Fall Saga. If you're in the wrong place, don't leave, because it's going to be fun. My name is Jonathan French. I am the author of the Autumn's Fall Saga. Thanks so much for coming. Let's hear it for CONjuration. Right? God, I mean, it's been a really great con. I mean, for a first year, and as aggressive as they were, this has worked out really well. I'm not head blocking this, am I? No. I have a canoe of a head. It's very possible that I am. Okay, so basically what we're going to do is we're just going to walk through some general information, no spoilers, nothing of that kind, just to get you guys familiar a little bit with the series. Welcome, hi. Get a ticket.
I got everyone.
You got one. You're ahead of the game. It's cool. Just as out of curiosity, it is possible, even as not famous as I am, that has anybody read either of the books yet? Okay, fair enough. All right, so let's get started. All right, so here's the first two books. There's going to be, let me give you a little stats, I guess is the best way to put it. So the genre is epic fantasy. I always tell people, picture Lord of the Rings if Jim Henson wrote it. That's sort of where we're at. But as far as the age group goes, it's always a tricky thing to answer because the rise of fantasy fiction and the popularity of Harry Potter has given this sort of YA heavy bent. A lot of people think if it's fantasy, it's got to be YA. And then the other side of it is things like George Martin and Joe Abercrombie, which is clearly not for kids. So that middle ground has sort of gotten lost. Well, that's sort of where I write. So my tagline has become suitable for adults of all ages. So instead of kids of all ages, it's adults of all. I would have read this at 14, 15. Some parents may not like it. There is some language. Mostly, though, it's complexity of plot. It is just keeping track of the amount of characters and, you know, all the divergent plot lines coming together. Some kids, depending on what they read and depending on their reading level, just might not be able to stay with it. There's going to be 8 books in the series. The first 2 are currently out. And we're probably going to refer to them quite a bit in the presentation, so just to give you a little code. The first book, if I say Heir, I mean The Exiled Heir, which is book 1. If I say Flynn, I mean The Errantry of Bantam Flynn, which is the second book. Heir came out in 10/12. Flynn came out earlier in the summer of this year. They can be ordered at all bookstores. I'm not big enough yet to where they're just automatically on the shelves, but you can walk up to Barnes & Noble and go to that nice little customer service counter and say, hey, I'd like to get Jonathan French's books. Can be done. And today, if you have those little blue tickets, we are going to give you a chance to win free signed copies of both. Plus, handy little tote bag with the shameless plug logo. So let's get started. When I wrote my first book, it sold, it was well reviewed, nothing major. The second one, Flynn, came out, and suddenly, I don't know what happened. There's me, number 6. I don't know if anybody know this guy. That's Joe Abercrombie. This guy is big right now if you're into reading more adult-oriented fantasy. And what's interesting is, see this currently unavailable? That was his pre-orders. So that tells you what a big fish he is. His pre-orders were number 3 on the bestseller list. Book hadn't even come out yet. I was pretty proud to be right there. I shot him an email, and I said, right behind you. He didn't respond. But anyway, so what's interesting is what happened was when Flynn hit, and at the end of the presentation, if we can get it working, I haven't checked if we have sound, I hope we do. I'll show you kind of think of how and why I think it did. But when Flynn hit, what's nice about writing series is that it dovetails all of that success right back into your first book. So suddenly, okay, there's Heir, number 40, which, okay, number 40, but here's the thing. Who is, click, come on. Oh, yeah. So this was fun. You know, I mean, this is one of the biggest names ever, and I was 2 below it.
Did you send him an email?
I can't find his email. You need to get on that, Elizabeth. Find his email. Let's track him down.
Just direct message him on Twitter.
That's right. I totally could. I may have sent him a picture like this. So let's see. All right. So like a lot of fans, well, you know, I grew up on this stuff. I lived it, I ate it, I breathed it. I mean, I died in a wool nerd. So I was just going to kind of give you some of my literary influences right now. L. Frank Baum, Oz, big time as a kid. This is probably going to be minorly cliche, but you can't deny Lord of the Rings. Okay. Anybody?
Yes.
Okay. Terry Pratchett, Discworld humorist, British. Amazingly, I mean, he's a comedian, he's a philosopher, he's brilliant. Currently dying, unfortunately, but anyway, huge. And then, right? But I have to say,
Oh yeah.
cut those two names off. I don't know if anybody know, but these were pastiche writers. Robert E. Howard was the creator of Conan. These guys came around well after he committed suicide and like co-opted his character's work. F. L. Sprague de Camp and Lynn Carter. I'll say it on camera. But Robert E. Howard, and then supplemented all of this with comics.
Yes.
Comics. 80s kid. Come on, this thing takes 2 clicks. Comics. Or comics. All right, so, but one of my biggest, first trivia question, you guys ready? And this is a little bit of a cheat. I've taken the title off. Anybody at all?
Is that The Hobbit? I can't really see it.
And here's why it's a cheat. This is the British cover, because I grew up overseas, so this was my copy. All right, no one? No takers. All right, now see. Lloyd Alexander is the author. All right, Chronicles of Prydain.
Yep.
All right, Book of Three, which is the title of this book. All right, those of you still clueless, you ready?
So like the library? Oh, the Black Cauldron.
Oh, right. Okay, so this was the second book, but Disney made that film. All right, so it's funny though. If you look at the British cover, check this out. Fleur de Flamme, there he is. Elanwy, there she is. There's Henwin the pig. Gurgi, right? I mean, Dolly is the only one not on the Disney. I mean, like, look at the British cover. It's like, boom. And even the Horned King, he made it here, and he's up there. If you're not familiar with Lloyd Alexander, read it. It is YA, but from a different pattern, from several decades ago. Heavily Welsh mythology based, which is not really touched that much. We get, Celtic and Nordic and all that, but Welsh really doesn't get touched much. He did, and it's great. There's 5 books. You get through them in a weekend, but they're amazing, and he is a massive inspiration for me. But, 80s film, one of Disney's lost films. I mean, very few people know this one anymore. It finally made it on like Blu-ray and DVD, but for the longest time, couldn't get it. But we'll dovetail into film because of this. So film influences, I don't think any of these will surprise you for an 80s kid, okay?
Yes.
Okay. Anybody know this one?
Frank Frazetta and thank you.
Yeah.
And Rob Bowden.
That's it.
Collaboration.
Anyone seen the animated Lord of the Rings?
Yes.
This is the same guy. Ralph Bakshi is the animator. But Frank Frazetta was famous for doing paintings of Conan and all this in the 70s. Frank Frazetta is he is what Tolkien is to fantasy literature, Frank Frazetta is to fantasy art. He is the godfather of them all. He is brilliant. And essentially what Ralph Bakshi did was they hired actors and they filmed this entire movie with actors. And then they animated over it. So that way, no special effects. They didn't have blue screens, but so then they were able to do this great, awesome sword and sorcery barbaric story. If you've never seen it, it's brilliant, and see it because Robert Rodriguez, the Sin City guy, is going to remake it into a live-action version and probably ruin it, to be honest. But this movie, if you haven't seen it, amazing. So check this out. And it's animated, it's brilliant. And then of course, right. Okay, so the Goblin Kings thing is no joke. All right, this was Jim Henson between these 2 movies was just branded onto my psyche. Okay, so let's talk about how all of this created books. All right. Anybody have any idea A, what these are, and B, what they would have to do with writing a fantasy series? Spitball. Yes, I heard yes, but
D20.
okay. Yes. Yes. What do they have? What do you think they have to do with writing a fantasy book?
Oh, they give you a lot of story ideas.
Most fantasy authors are role players. I mean, it's flat out. We just lost Robin Williams. He was one. I mean, there's a ton of people that game. I've been doing gaming since 1986 when my older brother let me sit in on a friend in his D&D game. Diesel, yeah. And so I essentially wasn't a serious writer, but I was a serious gamer. And I was running a ton of games for my friends. And after college, I started developing my own world. And my friend said, this is great. You really ought to do something with it. So I started writing it down, and I started hiring artists. And I pitched it to a gaming company, which is still around. It used to be great, and they're not so much anymore. But they are still in existence, unfortunately, because of an NDA I signed. I can't tell you who they are. But anyway, I pitched the world, and they were interested. They wanted it. They wanted to make this a setting for their role-playing game. Here's the deal. 3 cents a word, and we get to keep your intellectual property. Any guesses as to what my response was? Yeah, that was pretty much it. So I said no, and I decided to just keep my brainchildren close to home. Now, here's some of the artwork I had done for the role-playing game. You see the Rooster Knights already here, the Forgeborn here, Oz, clearly Tim Woodsman coming in. And in the early version of the role-playing game, if you notice, the Scarecrow character, they're called husks in the books. There's a musket, he's also wearing a pistol. Because in the role-playing game, I had black powder and firearms be a part of the world. But when I wrote it down, I dialed the tech level back, and it became more Dark Ages, much more, medieval. So there are no firearms in the books, but in the early version of the role-playing game, there were. All right. So the world is an analog of Ireland, just like Lloyd Alexander used Wales as his backstory for Prydain. Ireland is basically a mythological, fantastic version of Ireland. So that's kind of where you got to put yourself. Dark Ages, in Ireland. But Ireland is the source isle of all magic. Essentially, there are no gods in this world. There are no deities. It's just sort of accepted that magic as a divine force created the world. But when it got done, after this sort of fight with a void or chaos or some other celestial being, it was so exhausted it had to go dormant. The only way it could do that was to imbue itself in one place. So while it could sleep and regenerate, it imbued itself into Ireland and went dormant and started to hibernate. But it needed to protect itself. So what it did was it took the melding tools that it used to shape the world, earth, air, fire, and water, and gave them all guardians. And said, okay, you're going to be the stewards of the building blocks of creation while I sleep, and you're going to have power. And then he put the elves sort of as stewards over all of it. So they got to govern themselves, but the elves were sort of the great mitigator, right? They were the ones, if any problems, any disputes, anything at all, the elves had the power. And these were the greater Fae. Okay, so the larger Fae race. And there's lesser Fae. There's pixies and brownies and all that stuff. But these were the big dogs, the elementals and the elves. Well, what happened was the Gnome King, who was underground, petitioned the elves and said, you know what, I want to expand my holdings. I want to delve deeper. And the elves said, no. You're going to be getting too close. Come on. You're going to be getting too close to the Earth's core. That's dragon territory. Do not encroach on it and leave it alone. Gnome King said, I'm going anyway. He took some loyal retainers. Most of his people said we're not defying the elves, but he took a few loyal retainers and he went. He went down there and disappeared for centuries. Now remember, all of these Fae are immortal. You can kill them, but they live forever unless you do. So they were gone for centuries. Suddenly, out of the Earth's core came these guys. And they were stunted and ugly and hideous, and they had usurped the element of fire. Goblins are inbred gnomes. They'd been trapped down there for so long doing whatever they did to take the dragons out, and there were so few of them to begin with that they started interbreeding. So when they came up, they were twisted, they couldn't speak right, they were hideous, they were ugly, and they had taken fire. So now, no one really knows what happened to the dragons, and the goblins are back, or have now emerged. And the elves and everybody's sort of worried, but the elves, being the wise benevolence that they are, said, all right, well, we didn't foresee it, couldn't fix it, it's here, we gotta leave them alone. And several of these other races were like, look, this is no good. But they offered patience. While that was happening, humans crawled up out of the cave, essentially. They evolved. Quit being Cro-Magnon during these millennia. And the elves were tutoring them in magic, teaching them, because they saw them as children. Well, a few hundred years, the goblins are still around, but they don't really have a leader. There are a lot of them, and they have one element. So these human sorcerers who got taught at the knee of the elves said, that's our army. So they went, work, and made themselves masters of the goblin race. Then, peace out elves, and here come goblin kings. Now, just like in Labyrinth, where David Bowie is a human but he rules the goblins, that's the case here. Goblin kings are not goblins, they're men. But they have all this sorcerer's power. They're not immortal, but they live a long time because of their magic. So they put all of Ireland and all the Fae under their boot heel for hundreds of years. And how they were able to do that was using these things called Forgeborn, which were basically walking iron warriors. And the Fae, of course, have an allergy to iron. Eventually, and this is all backstory, eventually there was a rebellion. And all the Fae gathered together, and the elves, and some of the humans, and they started fighting back. And they were able to supplant the goblins and say, they kicked the Goblin Kings out, they took back their throne, and they got everyone back under control, but they lost a lot of power doing it. They never again regained the height of their civilization. So that is all the backstory, essentially, when books start. And that was about 900 years before page 1. So what has happened is that humans, after 900 years, this has all become pretty much myth, right? And they don't really see the Fae much anymore. They do, but not entirely. So this is all myth and legend. They're not really concerned about it. So what happens at the beginning of the book, and this is much of a spoiler, goblins are not the true elemental of fire. They stole it. So they don't get it naturally. Only a few of them can wield it. So at the end of the war, they imprisoned all the goblin pyromancers, all the flamebinders, all the ones who could wield fire, and they locked them up. The last one breaks out of prison, essentially, in basically the prologue of book 1. And that's where all this starts happening again. And the Fae are going, wake up, humans, this is coming again, and humans, So we have a return. And so now, 900 years later, the goblins are rising again, and they're looking for, clever title, The Exiled Heir. They're looking for the human that is in this bloodline. But it's been 900 years. They have no idea who. It's generations upon generations upon generations. So they're trying to find this scion and rise him back to power and put him back on the throne and retake what they had. So the war starts brewing again. All right, so let me walk through some paintings. Some of you might have come by the table and seen some of the artwork. All of this is Christopher West. This young man is a painter. He is unbelievably talented. He read my first book, became a fan, and we started collaborating together. And he has, all of these I'm going to show you are scenes and characters from book 1 as through his imagination, which is pretty good. So what you see here is one of the main characters, Patrick. There's 4 POVs in the book. This is one of the main ones. Patrick is one of the narrating points of view. Roisin is his childhood friend. She's known him since he was this big. She's 10,000 years old. And he's one of the few people that still kind of talks to Fae, which makes him a bit of an outcast. And he gets caught up. He's the farm boy that gets caught up in this growing war. And in this scene, as Chris did it, they encounter a Gruagach. Now, these are shapeshifters. And Chris here, and I'll show you a detail of it in a second, captured her in the book. She transforms from a crone to a black goat, and he painted her mid-transformation. So if you see hooves here and here, and then the crone is starting to it's just, and her belly is so nasty, it's so cool. But the Gruagach are one of the Fae races, the lesser Fae. They're not elementals, who were ticked about this whole thing with the goblins and the humans. And they said flat out, the elves made a mistake, humans and goblins should have been punished for what happened, and they hate both of them. So they are constantly using their shape-changing abilities to mess with humans, and that's how you get changeling children. One of the best ways that Gruagach know how to mess with you is to wear the face of a friend and seduce you. It could be your husband, your wife, whatever, your sweetheart. They seduce you, and then you end up having a changeling child, and they have a half-breed. So let me give you some details on here. If this will. Well, all right, details on Patrick. I just have to brag on it. Look at this water. Yeah. I mean, it's just unbelievable. All right, here's her. If I turn the lights off, it'd probably be even better, but whatever. He just did an amazing job. And then the one that always gets little kids when they walk up to the table. This is so funny. She's naked! They always say that. It's so funny. Yeah, she's a pixie, of course. She's an innocent, but not at the same time. 10,000 years of life. It's amazing she has the attitude she does. This is the pinup rockabilly Tinkerbell. She is the source of so much wisdom in this book. And Patrick's not only spirit guide, but his physical guide. And I think you guys will dig her a lot if you read the story. All right, moving on. Yeah, all right. Deglin's a gnome. This is Bulgai, his toad. During the war, Deglin was around, the one 900 years ago, and he is what is called a staunch. He's an herbalist with the gnomish cavalry, which is called the Warshanks. So he's an old soldier. He's got PST. There you go. I was getting wrong. I can't say it. He's got it like you wouldn't believe. Hates goblins. He's bigoted. He's bitter. This is if Hank McCoy from Star Trek and House were a gnome. That's him. He's bitter. He's angry, and then he's been in retirement, basically delivering babies and dealing with humans and curing their ills, and keeping his toad around. And now this war starts, and everything rises up again. And he's going, really? We're back to this. He is cantankerous and angry and pissed, but a lot of times he has a good point. All right, and his best friend I'm not sure why I did this so many times. Here's Fabar. This is Deglin and him were war buddies. Fabar's a Fomori. He's about 8 feet tall. Fomori came basically late to immortality. They were a mortal race, and then they came to the aid of the elves at a really crucial moment, and their gift was to be given immortality. They're very, very, very loyal to Erlen and the elves because of that. He retired with Deglin, and they've been living in the same village together when the Red Caps rise up. And as you can see, he's not happy about it, and Chris captured him charging, and if you can kind of imagine in the book, he did a nice job. He showed 3. But if you look, there's more pikes coming in. So he's charging about 60 of these guys by himself. And for some reason, my mom developed this like mad crush on him. So apparently he does it with older women. I don't know. Now if you look at the reverse of that shot, here's the Red Caps, here's the Goblins. Red Caps are not a separate race in this world. You might have seen in other stories, they're a separate fairy. This is like Goblin Nazis. Red Caps are the military branch of the Goblins. These are the fanatics who believe in, so they stain their hats with the blood of their enemies and they wear them as a symbol of pride. These guys are not D&D goblins. These are not fodder. You don't fight these and walk away. They're immortal, they've been warring for hundreds of years and they're really good at it, and they hate with a passion. And the one thing they love, even though they can't all use it, is fire. Because that's their element, even though they're not all wizards. So their war cry is very simple, and when you hear it, you're in trouble. Smoke and fire. And if you hear that coming, you're in trouble, which is why you need someone like Fabar, because they're going to come. This is Torkin Swinehelm. He's the leader of the main group in the book, so he's one of the principal bads. He was around 900 years ago. This guy knows war. All right. And again, Chris is really good with creatures. Work. All right. Second half of the panel was called Rooster Knights, right? All right, so we're going to get to them. Based on my previous inspirations, where do you think the idea for those came from?
I think that old cartoon show, The Rockin' Rooster, it's the
Ooh.
first thing that came to mind.
I'm gonna have to look that up because I kind of have a fascination with Nile. What's that?
Rockadoodle.
Rockadoodle. Yeah,
Rockadoodle.
right. There is a cartoon. That is a good hint. There is a cartoon that is involved in this. Anything involved? Okay. First one. Wah. Okay. They're birds. They're vultures, right? I always thought in the scene where they're using the sword to hit the stone, draw my stone. Like,
Terrifying.
I was just like, oh man. And of course, why are these things, like they're old and I get it, in the movie, and of course this is later in life when I was a kid, I'm like, I get the puppets had limitations. But just that moment where they're using a sword, I'm like, God, I want to see these guys use swords more. And then,
Oh, yeah.
Disney's Robin Hood, right?
Yeah.
My favorite character in the whole thing.
Jimmy Dean, Sausage King.
Right. But he was like the bard, he was the minstrel, so not really much of a fighter. He was cool, he had an awesome voice, he was kind of like Johnny Cash, but, So what do when you're writing a story? You go, Skeksis plus Cool Rooster equals, and you get Christopher West to paint it. You get these guys, okay? The Coburn, the race is called the Coburn. They're not all knights. The knights, because the Coburn are so territorial, extremely, extremely territorial, so you get 2 males together and it's not a good thing. The knights have to be celibate. It's absolutely crucial. Because in order to fight as a unit, as a brotherhood of knights, they can't have any females around. It turns them on each other too quickly. So they've given up a lot. They're not immortal. They don't even live mostly as long as humans because their lifestyle is so aggressive and they're so warlike. But the ones that were devoted to this idea of chivalry, which was taught to them by the elves don't even really know where they came from. They just refer to them as like a happy accident of magic. They're not even really sure. But they saw these barbarous, illiterate, animalistic brutes, and they just said, there is something here, and they tapped that, and they were able to convince some of them to join this thing, and they gave them their own order called the Knights of the Valiant Spur. And the Knights of the Valiant Spur are an order of Rooster Knights, the Coburn, all males. And in the book, remember the Gruagach from earlier, and the changelings? Pocket is a changeling. He's half Gruagach and half human. So he had his mom, unfortunately, thought she was sleeping with her husband and wasn't. Well, no one wants a changeling baby. Most of them are drowned or the mother's abort. Somehow, Pocket's mom fostered him with the knights. He becomes a scullery. He works in the kitchen, scullery. And Cork is kind of his ward. He sort of looks after him. Kind of have a Batman and Robin relationship here. But Cork has to go on errantry all the time. He only comes back to the Roost, which is the castle, every 2 years. Pocket idolizes the knights, He absolutely wants to be one, but the problem with being a Gurg, which is what they call half changelings, is they don't ever grow much past child size, so they sort of stay like hobbits. So he knows he's never going to have this physical prowess to be one of these guys. And even if he was human, a human versus a Coburn, the human usually loses. What kind of happens here, and it's not so much a spoiler, is the Grugok come looking for all of the half-breeds, and no one knows why. And they start wanting to get them all back. And so Cork, for pocket safety, has to take him with him on errantry. He has to say, you have to leave the castle, we know where you are, you're coming with me. So for the first time at 9 years old, Pocket, who's been living in this castle, sorry while I get a little choked up, gets to go and travel with one of his heroes. And he is one of the other POV characters in the story. So you get to follow him. Him, Rasheen, Patrick, and Deglin are the ones that tell the tale. All right. So Chris did all these. Here was his mock-ups for when he was coming up with a Coburn. Just thought I'd show you, it's kind of neat. He's got an older one. And then here he just had kind of a normal rooster head, and I was like, no, look at the Skeksis, they need to be kind of half monster. He added these tendrils to the back, which really kind of worked well. And he's still doing art, and I'll show you, this is kind of crazy. He's working on another Coburn piece for me right now, and let me show you kind of where it starts. This is where he starts. I mean, it's like, you can kind of see here's a sword, and he's jumping, and here's the shield, but he just layers and layers and layers, and the next thing you know, you get a finished piece. Pretty cool. All right, so I'm almost finished, and we can open it up to questions if I can get this thing to work. Come on. Oh, okay. So what's ahead? Coming up in the future for autumn's fall is a blank screen. I had this whole idea. For some reason it just doesn't work. Here we go. Chris and I are going to collaborate. We're going to release it next year. We're going to do an illustrated story. I'm going to write it. He's going to draw every page. Sort of like what Terry Pratchett and Paul Kidby did with The Last Hero. This time next year, there'll be a very creepy themed Halloween Tim Burton style AF story that we're going to produce together. He's going to have illustrations on every page. We're really excited about it. We're going to be working on it hard through the next year. I'm going to get book 3 of the Saga out in 2016, so you have a little time to catch up. And then, this works so well in theory. I'm still working on how the thing started, the role-playing game.
I'm sorry, I got really excited.
Hey, I'm excited, you're excited. Join the mailing list. Or are you local?
Huh?
Yeah. Do you play a lot?
Yes.
You want to be part of the playtest?
Sure, definitely.
Find me on Facebook.
Okay.
And once we're in development and we sit down to make sure all these rules work, we'll bring you in.
Okay. Awesome.
Sweet. All right. So, and I would give you another bookmark, but I already gave you one. All right, so, but in the meantime, here's the idea. I'm going to write, not in the meantime, currently what I'm working on is this, but I'll tell you what the idea is. I'm going to do 2 standalone books, have anything to do with AF at all. I'm going to do a YA superheroes book for kids. I'm going to do a very George Martin, Joe Abercrombie, grim and gritty, kids should not read, adult fantasy, and I'm currently half done with this. The reason I'm doing that is I needed to cleanse my palate after I wrote Flynn. It was just a really emotional ride, and I needed some time off, and while it was being edited and the test readers had it, I needed to write, but I couldn't continue on with AF until I was done, until they were done. So I just started writing, and here I am 60,000 words into this. So the idea is I want to bring everyone here. So I want to get kids reading here, and I want to get people who are a little bit put off by the fairy tale aspect, oh, this isn't cool enough or mature enough for me. I'm going to get them here. And it's going to become a funnel. And I just want everybody, young kids to start here, and then transition into AF. And then I want to get the older crowd here, and transition there. So this is going to be the first book to come out. This will be released, Elizabeth, what are we at, April?
April, well, we're saying spring 2015, but we're
Yes.
targeting April. Actually targeting April 15th.
Yes.
Because you thought that was
And
appropriate.
it's set in a completely different world, and all the main characters are half-orcs, so it's going to be very visceral and very gritty. So that's what's coming. And if we can get the sound to work, please, please, please find me on all this stuff if you care to, because I could use the support. If you read the book, please review the book. But I want to show you if I can get this to work. I want to show you what I did, if you haven't seen this already, what I did to make Flynn a bestseller. I'm going to, not me, here's the credit, right here. please play sound. We'll know in a second if this is going to work. Just kind of got stalled out.
Awesome.
But I don't know if this will continue to play. This is the best part coming up, actually. There's a sound delay. It's kind of hard to see, but he keeps dropping it.
Oh, as big as he is.
It's kind of hard to tell, but he just kept on throwing it down. But when that went on the internet, I was a little reticent because they say don't put your kids on the internet because you could open them up to all sorts of stuff. That's my son Wyatt. He was barely 2 when we did that. And, he's now only barely 2.5. But that kind of took off, and for obvious reasons, because he's so darn cute. But anyway, he's the reason I write. He's got to go to college, and thankfully he's the reason why he might get to go to college, because he helped Flynn make it. So, let's see what time we're at. Questions? Oh, we got 10 minutes or more. Questions about the series, about writing, about publishing, about my son, about Chris, anything at all? Yes?
You said you grew up overseas. Did you grow up in Ireland?
I grew up in England. Okay, so yeah, I'm close.
Because you said you said it was based on Ireland. That's why.
Right. As an adult, I was able to travel more once I moved back to the States, and Ireland I kind of done England, and it was a more rich environment to write in for me. It was easier, and quite frankly, research-wise, it was simpler. I was writing my first book, and it was a really daunting task. And at the time, I wasn't even writing a book; I was running a role-playing game. So it was like you're trying to find ways to inspire yourself, and so you're using books and other lore and other fiction and mythology, and so. But it definitely informed, crawling over ramparts and my son's middle name is Hadrian, named after Hadrian's Wall. I mean, I used to camp around there when I was a kid in the Boy Scouts, so yeah, it definitely had an impact. Yes, and then
Nuts and bolts. Did you use editing software? Did you find a professional editor?
I am married to a Columbia-educated English major.
Okay.
Yeah. So she's way smarter than me, and initially, now because of parenting and her own career, I pay someone, but originally I did because I was just starting out and I needed a budget. So she gave it a pass, and then I have test readers that I trust, and they've changed over the years, but they're test readers that some of them I don't know, so I don't worry about them BSing. So,
how did you find your editor when you had to? Google. Okay.
But honestly, I had to vet some of them because a lot of them will show up to book fairs and hand you cards and that kind of thing. And eventually you just have to know who you trust.
How costly a proposition is that?
They do it. A lot of them do it per word.
Okay.
So Flynn was 210,000 words. So sometimes you can't do that. You have to just negotiate. They range. Honestly, if they're really good and you're paying more than like $350, you're probably getting hosed.
Okay.
I would say don't ever go more than 500, but if you go 500, their resume better be killer.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Especially coming from a gaming background, how do you make sure your characters aren't too cliche?
Excellent question. Don't pull just from fiction. Don't pull just from gaming. Read biography, read history, read anything else. In fact, to this day now that I write full time, this is my career, I hardly read fiction anymore. You need to have a discerning eye. If you're watching a movie or whatever, you kind of have to step back as a fan. Because fandom, you can get really forgiving, right? And I'm a massive comic books fan, and I love television and movies. And everyone kind of says, you're a beardy vet, nothing pleases you, you're never going to like anything. Well, that's not true, because I thought the Lord of the Rings films were very good, and I thought the Avengers film was brilliant. Now I'm a big Joss Whedon fan. But you also have to step back and see where the problems are. And I wasn't afraid, like when Arrow, the show, came out, I wasn't afraid to be like, this is weak. What is going on? And then it started to get better. So use what you're seeing in pop culture and entertainment media, and just don't be afraid to kind of dissect it and then start going. But in the meantime, step away. Because nothing is worse, because we've all read it, and you don't maybe even know why you hate it. Nothing is worse than a fantasy novel written by someone who's only read fantasy novels. It's just not good, okay? So step back, don't be incestuous. I'm gonna read all this Forgotten Realms and that's all I'm gonna write, okay? Read whatever, I don't care. Teddy Roosevelt's biography, Jenna Jameson's biography, I don't care, just something. And history books, just branch out, and even other stuff, even other fiction. Romance, learn how to write sex scenes. And as far as your characterization goes, which is I think your original point, you kind of got to find the human element, even if they're a rooster. All right, because a lot of people, one girl at Con, I loved her to death, but she was pretty brazen. She saw the art, and instead of being totally impressed like a lot of people, she saw the cobra and saw the rooster knights, and she goes, how do you justify writing a serious fantasy book with 6 foot tall roosters? It was a good question. And I said, you're right, rooster knights is kind of a stupid description, but so is a 7 foot tall dog who co-pilots a spaceship. That's a stupid description. And then you meet Chewie and you're like, what a badass, right? So you have to find that thing. What is it that makes Rooster Knights cool? And then what is it about, don't do the cliche thing like Matt and I's panel about dwarves. We had a panel together about Tolkien's work. Don't make them all the same, right? Make one of them a klepto. Make one of them a total asshole. Like, don't make all the Rooster Knights the same guy, just in paper dolls. That doesn't work. You gotta make them, human in a way.
Thank you.
Ah, please. It was a great question. Anything else? Yes.
Is there part of the books that as you get going on this, I know I've written a little bit, and I know a lot of people who do write, and they can say, this book really wrote itself. It just kind of flowed into it and kept going. Is that true, and is it still the same way in book 2 and 3?
It's absolutely true. Frankenstein's monster exists, and he's in the keyboard. You've heard it. Ernest Hemingway said, writing is the easiest thing in the world. All you have to do is sit down at a keyboard and bleed. Okay. I had a bit of an outline, and then suddenly characters started doing stuff I didn't expect. And suddenly, what they call in if any of you ever work for the contractor or a builder, scope creep. The scope of the project just started to creep and get bigger and bigger. And suddenly, characters and story, and there was some plots and stuff. And then they started doing stuff I didn't want them to do. And I was like, whoa! And I was talking about this in the Death of Characters panel, which some of you might have been at. I made a promise to myself about a third of the way through book 1, and I realized that I didn't want to plan character death. So I stopped. I don't outline, I don't know. And I just, sometimes I get in situations, and you saw me, I'm very passionate about what I do, and I was halfway through Flynn, the second book, and I had a breakdown, and I went into my wife, and I was just losing it, and I was crying, and I said, I don't know who's going to survive this book. I said, I don't know if anyone is. So they absolutely, I think if you're doing something right and you allow entropy and you allow for chaos and you own it and it's organic, then you're doing something right with your books. I'm not saying that's everyone's process, it doesn't have to be, but it could be. So I have a feeling people are going to come into the panel, so let's do the drawing and let's see who's going to win some swag.
Oh, hold on.
Yes.
We've got people coming in, even though they weren't here for your panel.
Nah, we'll just do what's in here. Okay, it's all right. All right. Not looking. Crazy to go. Ha! All right. 623952. Not here. 623949. Also not here. I think we pulled too many tickets. We keep going. 623945. Wow. Yeah, this is not, this isn't
Can we
good.
pull them? Is it?
623951. Wow. I think they all start with 623938. God, this is like the worst. 61. Ending in 61.
It was through the drop. Was it the right end?
50. This is getting hilarious.
We pulled 40 tickets to start off with.
63.
Right here.
Awesome. There you go, sir. What's your name?
Andrew.
Andrew. I will. I've already signed the book, but I come by my table or just wait after it, and I'll put your name in.
Let's get a lovely picture of the winners.
Wait, I do. Come by the table, everybody. Let's get this little thing here.
Okay,
Thanks.
we'll tweak that out.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, so I'm here all weekend. I'm on panels. Thank you guys so much for coming, not only to CONjuration, but to this panel. I'm at my table. I'll be there for the next 30, 45 minutes. If you guys want to stop by, chat some more, ask me other questions, whatever. If you guys are prospective writers, I think at 2:30 I'm doing the Writers Roundtable, and then tomorrow, I can't remember the time, I'm also doing 21st Century Writing Tips. So if you want to learn how to make a career out of this, let me know. I'm here. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah.